Would you like to live without pain, suffering, or illness? Learn the secrets of achieving extraordinary health. Write down this phone number, 219-769-LIFE. That's 219-769-5433. You want more information on treatment options for you? With this edition of Inspired Living, here is Dr. Matt Hammett.
Welcome to our Northwest Indiana Community Impact event, how to effectively help attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with natural chiropractic care. The purpose of Northwest Indiana Community Impact is to challenge the mainstream thinking on what may be the cause of some conditions and to encourage researchers to think outside the normal boundaries when looking for solutions. Here's an interesting true story that came across my desk. Does this sound familiar? Here it reads. My mother ruined many a good manicure by wrestling with childproof medicine bottles. Peanut, she would say to me, you're so good at these things. Open this for mommy. At age 5, I could figure out instructional diagrams, assemble furniture, and hook up stereo equipment. I was fairly sure that I was smart. And then I entered the first grade, where struggling with attention deficit disorder became a problem. I remember Mrs. Roth holding up a flashcard with the letters A and S on it. Ass, I pronounced logically. No, she corrected me. I told you this last week. We pronounce it as with an AZ, not ASS. I had only a garbled recollection of her explanation that there was a difference between the sounds of Z and S. What I needed, and didn't know at the time, was a card with a donkey on it that read ass equals donkey, or AS equals AZ. I was watching a 5-minute video on ADD a bit ago. I missed over half of it because I kept getting distracted. Does that sound familiar? So, a chiropractic lifestyle approach to helping ADHD, such as the approach we developed, the Pillars Blueprint, is not only based on good sound evidence, but research is showing chiropractic is the motor of all lifestyle-based approaches. As Nobel Prize winner Dr. Roger Sperry says, the spine is the motor that drives the brain. In this event, you're going to learn how our movement drives the brain for ADHD. Skeptical a bit? Let's begin by connecting the dots. By the way, if you find yourself getting distracted and lose focus, pause it, rewind, and watch this over and over till you get it. Piece of cake. So let's get into the meat of this. Dr. John Ratey, co-author of the groundbreaking ADD/ADHD book, Driven to Distraction. He presents some evidence in Spark that exercise tempers these disorders. And he states that exercise can raise levels of dopamine and norepinephrine and improve functioning of brain systems that regulate impulse, memory, and attention. Over the past 10 years, several research groups have demonstrated that chiropractic spinal adjustments can change various aspects of nervous system function, including muscle reflexes, cognition processing, reaction time, and the speed at which the brain processes information. It's easy to get distracted in today's world. It becomes so full of information, noise, and interruptions that all of us feel overwhelmed and unfocused at times. The amount of data in the world is doubling every few years, but according to Dr. John Ratey, our attention system, like the rest of the brain, was built to make sense of the surrounding environment as it existed 10,000 years ago. And the attention system doesn't claim a central address in the brain. Rather, it's a diffuse web of reciprocal pathways that begins in the center of the brain called the locus coeruleus, or the arousal center, a part of the brainstem, and the signals it sends throughout the brain to wake it up and cue our attention. The network engages such areas as the reward center, or the limbic system, and the cortex. And more recently, scientists have included the cerebellum, which governs balance and fluidity. It turns out that there's a lot of overlap between attention, consciousness, and movement. And by the way, Neuroscience is finding that the spinal cord can carry limbic system centers independent from the brain, as well as learning capabilities independent of the brain. And this means that consciousness and attention may be carried out in the spinal cord itself, independent of the brain. In the future, research is going to need to investigate this, but for our review, let's continue our conversation with the current evidence for chiropractic care and ADHD. It is a scientific fact that chiropractic care and exercise raises the baseline levels of dopamine and norepinephrine. The attention circuits are jointly regulated by the neurotransmitters norepinephrine and dopamine, which are so similar on a molecular level that they can plug into each other's receptors. These are the chemicals targeted by ADHD medications. And of the many genes correlated with this disorder, scientists focus on the ones that regulate these two neurotransmitters. Broadly speaking, the problem for people with ADHD is that their attention system is patchy. They describe it as discontinuous, fragmented, and uncoordinated. Problems that can stem from a dysfunction with either of these neurotransmitters or any one of the brain areas in the system. Scientific research from Drs. Fernandez and Noda concluded that it is muscular compression of structures, the arterial and neurological, which is a causal factor in the lack of dopamine production. And they suggest a causal link between upper cervical subluxations causing compression of neurovascular structures at the base of the skull and or further down at the base of the neck where it meets the shoulders. I came across a really wonderful book, Manual Therapy in Children, which communicates the benefit of manual therapy in the treatment of children for various disorders, including ADHD. In fact, this book is contributions from various medical doctors, including surgeons. In the introduction, we read this. The problems associated with and labeled ADHD have a close connection with problems originating in functional spinal disorders. In particular, he notices that children with ADHD exhibit postural distortions and associated movement deficits of the upper cervical spine. He finds that following chiropractic care applied to the cervical spine, not only do postural deficits resolve in the children, but so does concentration and cognitive abilities. As such, visual concentration span and thus reading difficulties were improved immediately following the spinal adjustments. Other studies, such as smaller traumas, like a fall from a swing with no other trauma, children showed persistent postural asymmetry and insufficient gross motor functions. Attention span was short and impulsive when assigned tasks. Chiropractic care corrected the posture deficit and motor coordination improved, and verbal capabilities and visual component became better. What is interesting to the study was when the children stopped chiropractic care and the postural asymmetry and insufficient gross motor functions returned, so did the ADHD problem. After the relapse was corrected with chiropractic care, the ADHD also improved with the posture and gross motor function improvement, thereby showing the need for regular chiropractic care with kids with ADHD, not for pain, but for attention concentration problems. Dr. McPhillips studied 60 children with persistent primary reflexes relating to the balance system and reading difficulties. And in a number of studies, there is a correlation between movement disorders and reading difficulties. And the study also found such a link, and the author suggests a new approach to the treatment of reading difficulties involving assessment and remediation of the underlying neurological function. By the way, changing the underlying neurological function is what chiropractic is all about. It's not about moving bones. It always has been about changing the neurology. Concepts like neuroplasticity or neurogenesis and brain plasticity can be possible with chiropractic care. A case of teenagers with a history of head injury and concussion are linked to ADHD, by which chiropractic care reversed the issue. The EEG showed a lack of synchronization of alpha and beta frequencies between the left and right hemispheres, and the teenagers exhibited restlessness and compulsive-like behaviors when they handled objects. Following upper cervical adjustments, the restlessness and compulsive behavior resolved, and social communication improved. And a follow-up EEG revealed synchronization between alpha and beta frequencies were normal following chiropractic care. The good news is that with chiropractic care and regular exercise, we can raise the baseline levels of dopamine and norepinephrine by spurring the growth of new receptors in certain brain areas. In the brainstem, balancing norepinephrine in the arousal center also helps. I want to add here, I'm trying to stick with current evidence, but I want to add, chiropractic adjustments may have impact at the spinal cord level, which regulates certain neurotransmitters independent of the brain. In this area, I believe, will become a new exciting area in research as we understand certain mood disorders like depression and other neurodegenerative conditions, and how spinal adjusting techniques may have impact on these conditions, especially in the area of prevention. By the way, a study of 114 children with ADHD concluded that they have brainstem dysfunction as measured using something called the brainstem auditory evoked potential. So the brainstem auditory evoked potential may contribute to the diagnosis of ADHD. Doctors Mulhall and Werberg in their SIDS, that's Sudden Infant Death Syndrome, the book that they wrote, it discusses how an upper cervical atlas subluxation, that's the first bone of the neck, and how it can affect the brainstem area in kids with SIDS. The prefrontal cortex also bears responsibility for ADHD. And again, studies have shown that chiropractic care and exercise has a positive influence on the functioning of this area as well. The prefrontal cortex is the home of working memory, which sustains attention during a delay for reward and holds multiple issues in the mind at once. If working memory is impaired, we can't stay on task or work toward a long-term goal because we can't keep an idea in mind long enough to operate on it or to ponder, process, sequence, plan, rehearse, and evaluate consequences. There is an important relationship between movement and attention. It's not simply a matter of whether the signals get through to capture our attention, but how fluidly that information travels. This is where the attention system ties in with movement and thus chiropractic care and exercise. The areas of the brain that control physical movement also control and coordinate the flow of information. The cerebellum is a primitive part of the brain that for decades was assumed to be involved only with governing and refining movement. When we learn how to do something physical, whether it's a karate kick or snapping our fingers, the cerebellum is hard at work. The cerebellum takes up just 10% of the brain's volume, but it contains half of our neurons, which means it's a densely packed area, constantly buzzing with activity. But it keeps rhythm for more than just motor movements. It regulates certain brain systems as they run smoothly, updating and managing the flow of information to keep it moving seamlessly. But in patients with ADHD, parts of the cerebellum are smaller in volume and don't function properly. So it makes sense that this could cause disjointed attention. Maintaining the health of your spine joints with regular chiropractic care can keep you exercising efficiently and effectively, not just as a musculoskeletal level, but on a biochemical and neurological level, and we know this in science. Chiropractic care and exercise tempers ADHD by immediately increasing the neurotransmitters dopamine and norepinephrine. When we exercise, for example, particularly if the exercise requires complex motor movement, we're also exercising the areas of the brain involved in the full suite of cognitive functions. We're causing the brain to fire signals along the same network of cells, which solidifies their connections. Along with regular chiropractic care and exercise, we can eliminate the need for drugs. ADHD stems from malfunction of the brain's attention system, a diffuse linkage of neurons that hitches together areas controlling arousal, motivation, reward, execution, function, and movement. So activities like martial arts work well for ADHD kids. They have to pay attention while learning new movements, which engages and trains both systems. A highly structured form of exercise such as ballet, figure skating, or gymnastics, and less traditional sports such as rock climbing, mountain biking, whitewater paddling, and skateboarding are also effective in a sense that they require complex movements in the midst of heavy exertion. That's right, I said skateboarding. Sorry, Mom. The technical movements inherent in these sports activate a vast array of brain areas that control balance, timing, sequencing, evaluating consequences, switching, error correction, fine motor adjustments, inhibition, and of course intense focus and concentration. In the extreme, playing these kinds of sports is a matter of survival. Avoiding getting karate chopped or breaking your neck on the balance beam, or drowning in a swirling pool of white water, and thus taxing the focusing power of the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system. Parents, no need to worry. Regular chiropractic care helps prevent injuries and speeds up the healing process for those aches, strains, and sprains along the way. When the mind is on high alert, there is plenty of motivation to learn the skills necessary for these activities. As far as the brain is concerned, it's do or die. And of course, most of the time, we will be in the aerobic range, which boosts our cognitive abilities and makes it easier to absorb new moves and strategies. Dr. Rady, co-founder of the Sparking Life movement, emphasizes, and he says this, and I quote, "The truth is, everyone has a different level of attention deficit, and you'll have to experiment to see what regime works for you. Knowing how it works will allow you to find the best solution for you. On our genome, writes the genetic constitution, it is an evolutionary fact that we require 7 to 9 miles, or some sources, 8 to 12 miles of walking. We need to generate lots of spinal motion in order for our spine to stay healthy. Spinal hygiene is not a well-versed or well-written about topic. This needs to change in the chiropractic literature and institutions because we are not moving enough and we are not getting the right movement in our spines each day." And Dr. Roger Sperry, a Nobel Prize winner, teaches us that spinal movement is the motor that drives the brain. I can't encourage you enough to have your spine checked regularly by a trained wellness lifestyle chiropractor in your area and stay focused on the road to health. As far as consistent exercise, Dr. John Rady recommends, at the absolute minimum, 30 minutes of exercise to begin each day of maximum heart rate. It's not a lot of time, especially considering that it will help you focus enough to make the most of the rest of your day. And for you do-gooders, read my ebook, The Pillars Blueprint, and check out our poster on Facebook. For anyone who's not currently a patient in our office, when you call the schedule, let's face it, if you're not walking 9 miles per day and living like a hunter-gatherer, mention the ADHD event and the staff will knock off 50% on your first visit, right? That includes the exam and any necessary x-rays. That's a huge savings. Call the office for more information, 219-769-LIFE. That's 5433. Stay well. I'm Dr. Matt Hammond.